The dark side of mental freedom. Why your unfiltered mind is sabotaging your success. You know what's fascinating? We live in a culture that constantly celebrates self-expression, authenticity, and living your truth. We're told to speak our minds, follow our hearts, and never suppress what we're feeling. But here's the uncomfortable reality nobody wants to talk about. This advice, when taken literally, is a guaranteed path to self-destruction. And the ancient wisdom that recognized this 2,500 years ago holds the secret to why some people seem to effortlessly rise to the top, while others remain trapped in cycles of frustration and failure. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the most successful people you know seem to have this almost superhuman ability to stay calm under pressure? How they don't react to every provocation, don't chase every impulse, don't voice every opinion that crosses their mind. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's mental discipline, and it's the single most underrated skill separating those who achieve their goals from those who constantly wonder why success eludes them. Here's what's really happening in your brain right now, in this very moment. Your mind is generating thoughts at an absolutely staggering rate. Neuroscientists estimate we have somewhere between 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. That's dozens of thoughts every single minute. Some are productive, many are neutral, and a disturbing number are actively harmful to your well-being and success. Your mind whispers that you should sleep in instead of going to the gym. It tells you to snap back at that colleague who challenged you in the meeting. It suggests that scrolling social media for another hour is more appealing than working on your goals. And here's the trap. Every time you act on these impulses without filtering them, you're training your mind that it's in control, not you. Think about the last time you got really angry about something. Maybe someone cut you off in traffic, or a family member said something that pushed your buttons. In that moment, your mind presented you with a whole menu of responses, didn't it? Sharp words, aggressive gestures, maybe even fantasies of revenge. Now, if you had expressed every single one of those thoughts, what would have happened? The situation would have escalated, relationships would have been damaged, and here's the kicker. You wouldn't have felt better, you would have felt worse. Because uncontrolled expression of anger doesn't release it, it reinforces it. It literally carves neural pathways that make you more likely to react angrily in the future. This is what the ancient teachers understood that we've somehow forgotten in our modern obsession with authenticity. The mind, left uncontrolled, is not your friend. It's more like a wild horse that will take you wherever it wants to go unless you learn to hold the reins. And just like that wild horse, your mind moves swiftly, jumping from thought to thought, desire to desire, reaction to reaction. It lands wherever it feels pleasure, regardless of whether that landing spot is good for you or catastrophic for your future. But here's where it gets interesting. The very difficulty of controlling your mind is precisely what makes mental discipline so valuable. Think about it economically. In a world where everyone acts on impulse, where most people say whatever pops into their heads and chase whatever desire appears most appealing in the moment, the person who has developed the ability to pause, to choose their responses, to direct their attention deliberately, that person has a massive competitive advantage. They're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice. Because mental discipline isn't about becoming some emotionless robot. It's about creating a gap between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, put it perfectly when he said that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. Mental discipline is about expanding that space. It's about developing the capacity to feel an emotion without immediately acting on it, to have a thought without automatically believing it or expressing it. Consider how this plays out in your daily life. Every morning, your alarm goes off. Your mind immediately starts negotiating. 5 more minutes won't hurt. You're so tired. You deserve more rest. You can skip your morning routine just this once. If you have mental discipline, you recognize these thoughts as just thoughts, not commands you must obey. You get up anyway. You do the hard thing. And here's what's powerful about this. Every single time you override that voice telling you to stay comfortable, you're building mental muscle. You're proving to yourself that you're in control. The same principle applies to every area of life where success requires delayed gratification. When you're working on a challenging project and your mind says, "This is too hard, let's check our phone instead," mental discipline is what keeps you focused. When you're in a difficult conversation and your mind generates a cutting remark that would feel satisfying to say, mental discipline is what helps you choose a more constructive response. When you're faced with a temptation that promises short-term pleasure but undermines your long-term goals, mental discipline is what allows you to say no. Now, I want to address something important here, because there's a common misconception about mental discipline that actually prevents people from developing it. Some people hear this message and think it means suppressing all emotions, never expressing negative feelings, becoming some kind of perfectly controlled person who never struggles. That's not what we're talking about. Mental discipline doesn't mean you don't feel things intensely. It means you don't let those feelings make all your decisions for you. It's the difference between feeling anger and being controlled by anger, between experiencing anxiety and letting anxiety dictate your choices, between noticing a craving and automatically indulging it. The real power of mental discipline becomes obvious when you look at anyone who's achieved something difficult. The entrepreneur who built a successful business didn't do it by acting on every fear and doubt that crossed their mind. They had those fears and doubts, probably daily, but they developed the discipline to act in alignment with their goals despite those feelings. The athlete who reached the top of their sport didn't feel like training every single day. They trained anyway. The artist who created meaningful work didn't wait for inspiration to strike. They showed up and did the work, even when their mind told them it was pointless. So how do you actually develop this capacity? Because it's one thing to understand that mental discipline is important, and it's another thing entirely to build it in your own life. The answer is both simple and challenging. Practice. Mental discipline is exactly like physical fitness. You can't develop strong muscles by reading about exercise or thinking about going to the gym. You have to actually lift the weights. Similarly, you can't develop mental discipline by understanding it intellectually. You have to practice it daily. And here's your starting point: meditation. Now, before you dismiss this as too new age or too difficult or too time-consuming, hear me out. Meditation is fundamentally nothing more than practice in directing your attention. When you sit down to meditate, even for just 5 minutes, here's what happens. You attempt to focus on something simple, like your breath. Within seconds, your mind wanders off. You notice it's wandered, you bring it back. It wanders again, you bring it back again. This cycle repeats dozens of times in a single 5-minute session. And every single time you notice your mind has wandered and you choose to redirect it, you're literally doing a rep at the mental gym. You're strengthening your capacity to notice when your mind is running on autopilot and to consciously redirect it. The beauty of this practice is that it translates directly to the rest of your life. When you've practiced redirecting your attention in meditation, it becomes easier to redirect it when you're tempted to check your phone during focused work. When you've practiced observing thoughts without acting on them during meditation, it becomes easier to notice an angry thought and choose not to speak it. When you've practiced maintaining focus despite distractions on the meditation cushion, it becomes easier to maintain focus on your goals despite the countless distractions life throws at you. But meditation is just the foundation. Mental discipline extends into every decision you make throughout the day. It's choosing to have that difficult conversation instead of avoiding it. It's choosing to do your most important work during your peak energy hours instead of filling that time with easy, comfortable tasks. It's choosing to respond to criticism with curiosity instead of defensiveness. Each of these choices is a practice session. Each one either strengthens your mental discipline or weakens it. Here's something crucial to understand. Every time you act on impulse, every time you let a passing emotion dictate your behavior, you're not just making a single poor choice, you're training your brain that impulses should be acted upon. You're making it more likely that you'll act on impulse the next time and the time after that. You're creating a pattern, carving a neural pathway that gets deeper and more automatic with repetition. This is why undisciplined people tend to become more undisciplined over time unless they consciously intervene. Their habits of thought and reaction become increasingly ingrained. The good news? The opposite is also true. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you choose your response instead of defaulting to your automatic pattern, you're creating a different pathway. You're training your brain that you are in control. You're making it easier to make that same choice next time. This is how mental discipline builds momentum. The first time you resist an impulse, it's incredibly difficult. The 10th time, it's still hard but noticeably easier. The 100th time, your new pattern starts to feel natural. The 1000th time, what once required enormous effort has become almost automatic. Let me be crystal clear about something. This is not easy work. If it were easy, everyone would have mental discipline and the world would look very different. The reason most people lack mental discipline is precisely because it's hard to develop. It requires you to do uncomfortable things consistently. It requires you to face the parts of yourself that want to take the easy path, avoid discomfort, and prioritize short-term pleasure over long-term benefit. That's genuinely difficult, but difficulty doesn't mean impossible. It means valuable. Think about what your life would look like if you truly mastered this skill. Imagine waking up and immediately getting up when your alarm goes off. No negotiation, no snooze button. Imagine going through your day with clear focus on what matters, not constantly derailed by every distraction and impulse. Imagine handling conflicts and challenges with calm clarity instead of reactive emotion. Imagine the compound effect of making aligned choices consistently over months and years. That's not fantasy. That's what becomes possible with mental discipline. The ancient wisdom that recognized all of this was incredibly clear on one final point. A disciplined mind is the foundation of happiness. Not comfort, not constant pleasure, not the absence of challenges. Real happiness, the kind that persists even when external circumstances are difficult. Because when you have mental discipline, you have agency. You're not a victim of your circumstances or your moods or your impulses. You're actively creating your experience through the choices you make. And that sense of agency, of being in control of your own mind and actions, that's where genuine well-being comes from. So here's my challenge to you. Starting tomorrow morning, commit to just 5 minutes of meditation. Sit comfortably, focus on your breath, and practice bringing your attention back every time it wanders. That's it. Don't try to completely overhaul your life overnight. Just build this one foundational practice. Then, throughout your day, pick one area where you know you tend to act on impulse. One place where your undisciplined mind regularly takes control. Maybe it's hitting the snooze button. Maybe it's checking social media when you should be working. Maybe it's how you respond when someone frustrates you. Pick one thing and practice exercising mental discipline in that specific area. Build the skill gradually, but build it consistently. Because on the other side of this practice is a version of you that's more effective, more resilient, more focused, and genuinely happier. A version of you that's in control of your mind instead of being controlled by it. And that version of you, that's who you're capable of becoming. The question is whether you're willing to do the difficult, unglamorous work of building mental discipline one choice, one practice session, one small victory at a time. Your mind is the most powerful tool you have. It's time you learned how to use it.